ladies and gentlemen, to Toward a Quality of Life. We're here in the month of April, late April, the year 2004. And this evening we're going to do a follow-up interview session with Miss Lara Ferrar, a student in journalism at Boston University. And she's here to interview me, which is pleasing to me. So I hope you enjoy our conversation together.
Yes. How are you doing, Nancy? It's great to be back. And I hope...
Welcome back.
Thank you. It seems like just yesterday I was here. I can't believe it's been, I don't even know how long, a couple months.
Couple months, yes.
But I wanted to start out with some basically general issues and something that's near and dear to your heart, which is the issue of animal rights. And I want to start off with the topic of the United States and animal rights. And many countries, I read today, make it where euthanization of an animal that's in a state where they're in like horrible pain must be done. But in the United States, it's an option. It may be done. And I wanted to know, is the U.S. different with their policies with animal rights? Why are we less humane?
Yes, we're not the leaders in the world, believe it or not, with animal kindness and laws that protect animals, or even laws that protect animals in research. The most forward-looking country in that respect, and historically, is the UK, the United Kingdom. And other countries, of course, are way worse than we are, but no, there is not a uniformity. And when you say that animals are not to be euthanized by law if they're in terrible distress, do you mean animals in experiments or any at all?
Any at all.
Yeah. I wasn't even aware there was a law to that effect, but it doesn't surprise me. So then, if you bring in an animal to a veterinarian, for example, and it's very suffering, they might be required they are not required by law to put it down. If there's no hope and it's just suffering, they're not required to put it down.
Is that wait.
I thought there's been some pressure on people to put animals down. I didn't know if it's a matter of law or not.
Right, and it's not a universal thing, obviously, but in many European countries, for example, and it may be just restricted to animal testing, I'm actually not sure, but countries will enforce putting the animal down.
I see.
Some kind of distress.
I think what you're talking about might be more just general law. I think you're talking about general law, and the rules about animals in experiments are more wide open as far as that goes. In theory, one is supposed to present reasons why, for example, research has to be done that will be painful and stressful and end up in an animal dying, and an animal may have to be killed without euthanization and suffer for the purposes of the experiment, and that can still be done in this country according to federal law. In theory, people are supposed to get permission going through committees that oversee these research situations. I don't know how much research that goes on in private industry is overseen or supervised, but a lot of it does, and so some of it may certainly pass. But you can even do experiments where an animal will suffer terrifically, but because what you write in your proposal has to do with a situation where the animal presumably has to suffer and it's necessary to do the research, it's allowed, which is an awful thing, but it's allowed.
I want to talk about the moral issue of animal testing. Do you think that we have a moral, ethical right to use animals as we do? Where does it lie morally? What are the foundations as viewing animals as sentient beings that have emotions? How is that valid, and how can you prove that?
Well, it's one of those things that goes without saying. It won't even really lend itself to articulation any more than if you were to take a baby and burn cigarette holes in its skin. I would think that you don't have to give an explanation of why that is a wrong thing to do. The baby, you would just know from an empathy, the baby would be screaming and squirming and, you know, horribly crying, or obviously if you did that, and most people would automatically call that torture. Well, it's a similar thing for an animal, and it goes without saying, it should be self-evident that when an animal is squealing or howling and crying and shivering and shaking, staying in the corner of its cage and trembling and defecating and urinating out of fear when it hears or sees the experimenter approach, when it's hissing and trying to do everything it can to avoid the situation, even avoid the situation of being caught and being incarcerated at all in the best of circumstance, but housed in a cage as big as itself in some kind of indoor lab setting, you know, locked away there night and day, totally aversive event, that it should be self-evident. And yes, animals are sentient creatures, and if you really allow yourself to be free and easy and watch, and not in some kind of technical way, but just let yourself go and be at one with animals and everything around you, and listen to the birds singing and see how they're communicating, and listen to the different sounds they make and how they're looking, and different things result from when they talk, that obviously they're communicating with each other. Or dogs, how they'll wag their tail or look at you. You can tell when they're impatient. You can tell when they're satiated. So they're, just by being on the same wavelength, you can tell that these are feeling, knowing creatures, and that pain, whether the pain of if I stick a needle into my leg, or if I burn my skin with radiation, or if I slam my head to make a concussion so I can study brain injury with MRI or something to that effect, that it's as bad for it to happen to an animal as it would be to happen to me or to any human being. Taking a skull, whether it's on a German Shepherd or it's on you or me, and smashing it to make a concussion is as bad for each of us as far as pain and distress and horror goes. Or to burn us with radiation and have to suffer, and the labored breathing and the moaning and the rise in temperature and all the things that go along with it are identical. So pain is pain is pain, no matter what body you're in, as is stress and all the pains that are not literally physical but are felt physically, like anxiety and fear and horror.
Many people would argue that there have been amazing advances made in, say, medicine because of animal testing that have allowed humans to live. So how do you argue against that argument?
It's really putting the cart before the horse. What I say is, if nirvana were achieved tomorrow, one separate issue is that we are not going to find the cures for humankind through researching on animals. So let that stay aside. Nor are we going to find cures for cancer using methods and thinking patterns that we do now, which, separate from using animals, address all kinds of topics on cancer that have nothing to do with all the carcinogens and toxins we're breathing in and that's meeting our body, that we're ingesting, that are in field forces around us. No one's going straight to the cancer sources, number one. Number two, and eliminating them. Number two, with respect to using animals to get to the bottom of things, we'll never get to the bottom of things using animals, and I won't get off on that tangent. Even if we pursue this course, we will never find what we need to know for our health and welfare through animal testing. But even if we could, which we cannot, we cannot have a world based on torture of sentient creatures. That's out of the question. All you have to do is be the animal. Take a walk in the animal's paws. That's what's out of the question. And so when we say, look what we're doing for humans by hurting these animals, and we never say by hurting them. We say by, if you look at the literature, as it's so called, that does research on, that talks about research on animals, they call them subjects, and they talk about all the manipulations that were done. They never say this animal was shaking and screaming, and I cut its vocal cords to not hear the screams, or I couldn't fasten it because it so wanted to get it. Bit me once, you know, and so I found a better way to hold it, and that when I was done with it, I whacked its head against the table, as one of my colleagues used to do, whack the rats' heads and throw them in the basket, you know, to get rid of them. Presumably they're supposed to have better procedures now, but who can be in all the labs at all the times? There's millions of animals under research around the world. So we cannot get to where we're going, and so we overlook the immediate moral, ethical event, the reality. We overlook the reality. We say, see the humans we're saving. We even say sometimes, see the other animals that benefit. Your pet can benefit because this cat went through this kidney procedure. What about the cat in the kidney procedure? The morality is right in front of us. We conveniently skip that part. We could say about Cambodia, we could say about so many things that have been done that ravaged and hurt and desecrated humans and other kinds of creatures, and we have a rationale for them, and then later maybe we find out that we did actually horrible things, because it's the immediacy of the event. You can't skip over it. You can't ignore what's right in front of you, that these animals are undergoing pure hell more than Jesus Christ in many, many situations. And you can't skip over that and say, well, look at that. That's just a denial. It's a great denial of reality.
Aside from animal testing for medicinal purposes, animals are used, they're pets, they aid handicapped victims, people go to the horse races, clothing, makeup, whatever. Can society exist as it does today without the use of animals, and where do you draw the line? Because I mean, even in your life, I'm sure there's something that has gotten to its state because of some form of animal product, animal testing, whatnot. Where do you draw the line?
Where do you draw the line? I think keeping pets is a wonderful thing. I don't. If you keep a pet and it's alone and lonely all day, and it wrecks your garbage because it's frustrated and makes a mess of your apartment and is left on weekends without food and water as often, or you hear of cases where birds starve to death, left because, you know, people don't return from vacations or whatever. I'm not talking about that kind, but you know, pet circumstances where animals seem happy and healthy, and they seem to love the people they're with, and their behavior tells the whole story. If you have an animal that's scared and doesn't seem to relate and act in compliance with the situation easily and willingly, then you've got a problem. But if you don't have that, pets don't really bother me all that much on the scale of things. It doesn't bother me. I would say if you have to get a pet, why not get one from the pound, where a poor animal will be euthanized, or worse yet, clandestinely taken to a laboratory, sold for flesh. The greyhounds, that's going too far, because we can tell they're actually abused. That we can go and observe that this is abuse to them as it would be to anybody. Racing horses is fine if it could be in the idyllic kind of conditions of movies we've seen of people that raise horses, and someone becomes fond of a horse that's going to be a great horse and has a great relation, and the horse is treated well and not doped up to do what it does, and you know, is trained to win and seems to want to run, is a runner anyway. So there are a lot of racing horse situations, at least mythically, that could be nice for both the humans and the horses as well. But probably the way many of them are trained and drugged and then just put down and used, that's not so. That's probably, I don't know that much on the inside about horse racing, but there might be some very dire circumstances there. So the line is drawn with where the animal is comfortable and at ease and willingly seems to be a participant in the situation and has love and relationship with other creatures around it.
So as far as animal testing goes, what do you think the solution is to alleviating the
Well, the
situation?
whole issue of how we should proceed with medicine, I have great disagreements with the way science is proceeding, genome studies and transgenics and these new kinds of therapies, pharmacological therapies for cancer and so forth, radiation. Personally, I disagree with greatly. I think there is so much in the mundane world of how we're living, the fact that we have such fast and complex and burdened lives, overwhelming lives, and that we take in, right now, we're taking in toxins from many of the materials we're in contact with, maybe from the clothing, maybe from something we've used on our hair or on our skin. There are things in the skin, in the soaps that we use, commercial soaps that are bad for the skin. Certainly we've eaten food during the day that has things that don't go well with the body. The air is decidedly, I just had to contend with the road being paved in front of my house. It's still going on. And when the big engines were coming to break up the road, they were spewing thick, horrid smelling smoke that just penetrated everywhere. And I had to be breathing that. I was near it. And then after that, someone came and did some work on a garden where they used those pressed wood chips, and there's toxin there. It just filled, it still smells in the whole area. You know, and these are just a few of the things that you're breathing in addition to the regular things, and it goes on and on. I mean, I don't want to keep watching a computer monitor all day. Is getting your eyesight and you. It's as putting radiation into your body that you don't need. So the list is infinite practically and when it comes to cancer, to think, instead of saying, well, which foods are good and don't eat too much fat and don't eat, why can't we just have plain gardens with wholesome food that doesn't get stored for 1 and 2 years and fruits and vegetables that are not attempted to be genetically altered so they'll last longer or have a longer shelf life and all that kind of thing. But and natural farming methods back to the way farmers used to know, so that we don't have that tremendous amount of pesticides over the foods that doesn't go away when you wash it. And most places aren't washing it to boot, but it doesn't go off. It goes right in anyway, and we're taking that in every day and so forth. So there's so many things to medicine, mind, body, that we're far astray from. It's like a banana peel is on the floor, and every time you get up, you slip. But you never remove the banana peel. You go around it, whatever. You never go to the source. That's how I feel about it.
Exactly. I mean, in my everyday life and in yours, people are willing to complain about these things and say, oh, the rainforest, the recycling, whatever needs to be done and changed. When it comes to actually physically taking a look at your life and giving up something that would initiate that change, a lot of times people aren't willing to do it. Or on the same token, you don't have time to actually take time to consider it and try to make the change.
To reflect even.
To reflect.
Yeah, that's right.
So I mean, how is there any ever
Well, you know what I
solution?
think about the individual? It's fantastic. I've known some MIT professors who ride bikes, who could well ride very nice cars. So that is inspirational. But what I think, and people will call me communist for this, I think that we need national policies across the board. Like, if we're hitting people on air quality, water quality, and so on, or or to decrease the use of energy, there will be great competitive forces making people say, hey, you can't do this to me. So we have to do blanket kinds of programs where we all take the hit together, where we get together and we sit down and we say, well, and so GE will be saying, hey, they'll be over there sending out commercials and their marketing people to tell you otherwise, oh, that these people are foolish, and to show you all the greatnesses of whatever it is they want to sell you. But you say, whoa, you think you're the only one? Come over here, Boeing. Come over here, trying to think, Electronic Arts. Come over here, Biogen. Come over here, any of the major, all of you. We've all got problems all together. There's not going to be any kind of industries singled out here. Cell phones. Cell phones really are, I've been reading, which, if you have common sense, you've got to know that cell phones will do some disturbing of your tissue. They're sending out little microwaves. Obviously, that's going to have some disturbance. People that have found evidence that they do cause some problems have been hushed up, and which is, the way human history works. It's no big deal. It's just the way we work. And number two, they found now that ingredients in the brain tend to cluster together from using cell phones, which would, because of the ionic attractions and repulsions, which would make sense. And that information, is trying to get out there, but right now it's not getting out there until the many years pass, when we'll probably be seeing, and considering all the influences coming in, and that is a sort of a relatively smaller one than many other, it'll get lost in the great mix. Everything is a part of the bigger problem. So it can easily get lost, and a lot of it takes so much time, and a lot of it is so complex that how do you parse out which, what is responsible for what? But we have to push to talk about this, and that everybody gets hit all together. Right. Of course, if we get hit in the United States, if we ever became so enlightened as to all start really getting together, because that's how to get rid of depression, too. The more we are not trying to escape all these bad weathers and cancers of people that we know and all this stuff burdening our lives, that we're trying to find a place, where can I go where it's, life is just free and easy. Actually, we could alleviate a lot of this depression that we're feeling by saying, hey, we're all going to start really doing something about this. But it has to be done together, and we've got to push for it. We're a long way from that psychologically now. With the current president and his people, we've moved further away from that than we've ever been before. There's been a shift away.
Do you think that this is an American problem? You mentioned depression.
What I was going to say too, is that if we did it in the United States, which we're very far away from, we'd still be faced with, well, we've got global competitors that aren't doing this. Although Europe is really willing to do it compared to us. They're on that wavelength already. So if we, got together with them, we definitely, and I think South America would follow along. Brazil is facing tremendous problems. And China is not so foolish as to, if you need leadership, you need people out there doing it. That's how we got to where we are, knowing, saying anything about it at all. And China is not so foolish as to have totally dirty water and totally dirty air, unbreathable air. And they've had many, many environmental catastrophes from environmental degradation. So they're not so foolish as to hurt themselves that way.
So you're saying that you see an option for initiating change to, say, alleviate animal testing or toxins or whatnot would be to make big businesses such as GE, make it become part of like a strategy, almost a competitive strategy, and initiate a change and make it a trend, because really they're a big foundation and have the power to move society and change things.
Well, now that leads to another complication. I think that corporations cannot lead the way.
Right.
Even though they're the ones that are unfortunately, what we're talking about when we're trying to clean this stuff up, because they own it all. They spray the food. They dirty the air. You know, this is where it's all coming from. They make the cars that guzzle the gas and promote propaganda that tells you you need them, you want them, you should buy them. Even the safety feature has been overlooked with SUVs and so on. The promotions continue, you know, until somebody pushes really hard. But if what has to happen is for there to be a new consciousness, and boy, that sounds so pie in the sky. You know, there also has to be a totally nice summer with perfectly warm days and no extreme heat and no severe cloudiness or cold during the summer. I mean, that's how foolish that statement is. But what we really need is a different consciousness. People can still have enterprise and they can still make a business, but not on what they're making it now. So the landscape would look totally unlike what it's looking now. I mean, we'd be changing up our life totally, because we do have to live, you know, exchanging goods and service with each other, but organic goods, and you know, it would be small farmers, for example. It would psychologists back in the office where they really talk to people and have the time to take a reasonable number of clients and all this kind of stuff. And medicine would change, doctoring would change. Oh, it wouldn't be like it is. HMOs would be, we wouldn't be having capitation quotas and all this kind of stuff. It would be a whole change of consciousness. You know, so you'd have to get people believing that there's a better, more truthful, more realistic way to live.
But one of the big issues, though, is that the technology today is a cause of a lot of the things that you're talking about. And society is evolving, becoming more and more progressive, but the technology is an integral part of that. So to be able to fix that, you'd pretty much have to, remove the technology?
That's it.
So how is that ever going to be possible?
That's it. I mean, in fact, even computers are detrimental. I mean, we'd be so much better off just relating with each other. So maybe it would be established that a certain level of toxicity were permitted. I mean, pollution of whatever variety, be it air, water, or even radiation pollution, or electronic pollution. Even the stuff computers are made of. Look, when the World Trade Center burned, all those materials of technology went into all the people of New York and the surrounding area, who will definitely be getting sick from what's happened to them. And they were told, too, that it was okay to breathe. But all you have to have is about an 80 IQ to know that that was not okay. So, yeah, what do you do with technology? It's man's curiosity, human's curiosity to keep trying to make technology. Personally, you know, I know you can't. I'm realistic enough to know that you can't just wipe the table clean and say we're not having this, like the Taliban. The Taliban went back to like they just got rid of everything technological. You can't do that. It's evolutional. So I think the way to go is to make people feel the consciousness of greater meaning of life. That might bring about whatever kind of evolution of how it would all pan out. That might lead to the new way of living that likely would not be, certain kinds of technology would not be part of it. Like one big vehicle for one person in every household going on the roads of the United States all day long.
As far as the issues for you, especially with animal testing, why that cause? Why not the mistreatment of whoever in a country in Africa? I mean, you hear so much about people taking on causes today, and you wonder if it's a trend, if they're trying to do it because it's what they're supposed to do. What about you in animal testing? When did you take it on and why?
Actually, causes are a drag. in my opinion. I don't like causes. And I'm really not, I think we're too much into causes. That's this whole issue of politically correct, too, that these causes come up and then everybody learns ways that they're supposed to speak because of these causes, such as domestic violence and so forth. But it's all formatted. It's all somebody else's script. It's not just free living. Somebody else's script.
Right.
It's a drag. Causes are a drag. But I don't really do this as a cause. Some people do. I mean, they're much more involved than I. I'm kind of a traitor to the cause or a slack at the cause. I say about these things because they bother me. They bother me, and I love animals, and a lot of people share that. They love animals so much. I love animals. If I'm around an animal, I will be captivated most likely by whatever that animal. I'm not one to say, oh, and do too much for the animal, go overboard, but I just find them enrapturing. Just like that guy from Australia who does the alligator stuff.
Right.
He loves animals. Now, he loves snakes. I don't love snakes. But I love animals, and when I went to Arizona and I saw a rattlesnake, which are very not pretty. They're not good looking at all by human standards. But I gained a new respect. I mean, I was never hateful of snakes, but even like I'm starting to bring in all the uglier ones and the grislier ones. I love bears. I don't have to learn how to love bears. So I love animals, and I wouldn't have thought anything about it. But when I saw what was happening after reading a lot of the so-called literature, and I saw what was happening to animals in the lab in the real sense. I mean, supposing you weren't a famous scientist, supposing you didn't have a federally sanctioned university lab or private industry lab, supposing you were just my next door neighbor and you made a perfectly sterile, well-chambered housing situation with proper biologic techniques, and you did that to animals. Wouldn't you be called a nut and a screwball and a psychopath, and wouldn't you be immediately hauled away? Aren't animals in far less dire straits hauled away every day from people keeping them for bad circumstances?
Yes. It's a very good point.
So when you think just that you would enclose a monkey in a cage about as big as it is and lock it and leave it there, why don't we try sitting in a cage and then have somebody come and do something to you? Why don't we try it?
People would argue, though, that monkeys don't know any better. They don't know that life is to be different.
Oh, they do. They get sad. They're deprived of. They can't relate with each other. They get sick from whatever's done. Oh, they know better.
Right.
All you have to do, Jane Goodall. But you don't even. That's ignorance. All you have to do is be aware. I won't even say open your eyes and ears, because that's like a cause. That's telling you to go do something and be some certain way. But if you are aware in the least degree, you will see, wow, if you sat on an island where monkeys were, you would see, man, what kinds of things they're all doing and how much they know. And why are they used in so many learning and behavior experiments? Because why can they go on a space shuttle with electrodes in their head? Because they're such advanced creatures, which is a horrible, horrible thing to do, to put a plate in a monkey's head and send him into space. That's a horrible. To use them like you use a meat grinder or a toaster or a fork, or to use anything that way that's alive, to use it as a thing, and that's what happens. You see, you lose the sentience and the humanity and the creatureness, the lifeness. You lose life because you need a result So you use that, that's just a thing that you're using, and it happens to be a real life that feels pain, and you're using it.
Okay, well, I want to completely switch gears now. Well, not totally. I want to talk also about something that I know you've studied a great deal about, which is philosophy. And I want to ask you how philosophy has shaped the way you have lived your life, and has it shaped the way? What has it taught you? What are some of the major turning points and things you've learned?
Well, offhand, a cursory answer to that without reflecting, and I might think differently later, it might come to me in the back of my mind, but offhand, I don't think there's been anything that I've really learned or based my life on because of reading philosophy. In fact, when I did my PhD thesis, I wrote in the beginning of it, thank yous to all different people for various things, and my parents. And I said, no matter what, though, the real teacher is living and experience. You know, that's where you get all the knowledge. So I guess I kind of, there was a book by Ambrose, who recently passed, I believe, a well-noted historian, who said, about Reagan, named Sleepwalking Through History. Because Reagan was thought to be somewhat in a fog, even when he was a president, especially in his second term. And I would kind of say I kind of walked through my life. I've been perhaps less naive as different experiences have happened to me, and life goes on. But I probably just didn't know much better than how I was proceeding, and that's how I proceeded, kind of by my internal navigation, but a foggy navigation, not a clear one.
As far as being able to trust your internal navigation and proceeding as you said, that however you felt it was at the time in life, how could you challenge people to take a step back and to maybe analyze their life and see what could be changed in it?
Well, first I'd like to say about the trust. I never trusted my navigation. It was the best I could do. I didn't trust or distrust it. But I don't want to tell people what to do, but again, the unexamined life is not worth living, as the saying goes. And I find, we were talking prior to the show, how busy and maddening current life circumstances are for most people, including ourselves. And I find that I need spaces where nothing is pressing me. I have a little breathing space, and I can just reflect. I may not even know what I'm reflecting about. I just enjoy to this day to have a chance to put it all together, but I don't sit down and say, okay, now I'm going to put it all together because I have some time. It's just like I have the space and it all seems to take care of itself. But I find that's very useful to me, and I don't want to, because this reminds me of causes, I don't want to be outlining a script of how somebody could or should do something.
Right. A lot of people would argue that philosophy serves no purpose. It's just arguing about things that have no answer, never have an answer to. What do you have to say about that? Well,
I really enjoyed thinking deeply in certain stages of my life. It's just my inclination to think. I thought deeply as a child without reading philosophy. I used to ponder infinity, and I feel I went into infinity, that it's possible. And so I kind of, different personalities tend towards that or tend towards not being that way, in fact. And I used to enjoy really thinking of what is truth, what is beauty, what is justice, and I'd get very deep. But in line, again, with something we were talking about prior to the show, in line with the pragmatics of the technological society, and the way I saw that though the portions of academia were parsing out bits and pieces of deep knowledge and deep specialization, but deep knowledge in certain branches of philosophy instead of like, I'm a synthesizer. I love to bring it all home.
Mm-hmm.
And people who have watched this show have noticed, oh, you go everywhere. No, I go everywhere so that I can round it. I'm meandering through and sewing it all together. I love synthesizing, bringing it all together, how it all fits together. So I noticed that, it was getting very technically specialized, including in philosophy, and certainly in the other sciences and fields, and technological and pragmatic, and that the word is not through deep books like those of Immanuel Kant, or Sigmund Freud for that matter, that sit on the shelf, that books aren't the way, really. I don't care how famous, well, certain bestseller books like, what's that Children Potter book, and, certain huge things do hit the culture and make a difference. But generally, intellectually, for what little there is, the only level people are getting hit at is propaganda through the media, and namely through internet and television these days. So I just went in line with that more, and somewhat consciously got myself out of doing that kind of, finding that would be, even though a beautiful thing, a very, unfortunately in the grand scheme of things, it's not narrow, it's a whole beautiful thing, but it's specific, it's cocooned, it's academic, as the saying goes, it's academic. So that's, but there was another part of that question, Phyllis. So deeply, that's the deep side of philosophy. But then there's another part of philosophy, it's many-faceted, as are all things, that no matter how deep we want to go, all of us face philosophy. Even people who don't have full intellect, so-called IQ, face philosophical questions. How come nobody loves me? How could I be born from a mother who seems to hate me? Why did my father never pay attention to me? Is there a God? How come people die? Why is there cruelty in the world? Why, as that book's title says, do bad things happen to good people? No matter who we are and how much we avoid or don't avoid questions that are philosophical, which is the meaning of life, face all of us. They're just a part of being alive, a part of having a brain, but not so much a brain, the consciousness that we have.
For a person who thinks about these philosophical issues you were mentioning, what's an easy way to approach philosophy and embrace it and learn about it, aside from having to get your PhD or pursue it in college, get a 4-year degree? What would you say to someone who just has a slight interest or thinks about deep issues?
Well, I think there are some, there are some really nice textbooks that are basic, that you can read on your own, that start off with the Greeks, Aristotle and Plato, and talk in very simple terms about the kind of questions that were on their mind. And you can start to read about it, and it goes through to history till today. One time I taught a course in philosophy, and we used that introductory, and we used that. And very interesting, if you like that. You can find books that will tell you the history of philosophy in a nutshell, and then you can go from there.
One of the major philosophical issues has to do with our sense of reality and what's around us. And it's been proposed that our reality could just be a dream, that we're not actually really living in it. What do you think about that theory?
Quite possible. Quite possible. And that might hook up with the idea that there are other dimensions, physics speaking, as in physics, of which we aren't aware. Physicists are, many physicists are trying to find other dimensions than the ones that typically get considered, and prove that there are other dimensions. So in a physics sense, it could be real, but just real metaphysically as well. Similarly, though it's kind of tangential, the idea that paranormal things may in fact, be available to us to sense, that there may really be something like that. And, otherworldly things is entirely possible. And the fact that, I think maybe if you're prone to wonder at all, to any degree, you would come along the way of your journey at some point to think that you're living in a dream, and that this isn't real, and what is reality? What is reality? What is reality to a person who has what's considered a serious mental disorder, for example, and lives in a logic and a plane of existence that is really real to that person? I mean, is that unreal? Is that unreal just because the person is so-called crazy, or is that a reality? Is there really a reality to that?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to talk about death, but the fact that I'm saying that I don't want to talk about death reflects how it's viewed by society as a negative thing, something you kind of want to avoid in your daily thought processes. Is there a way to look at death as a positive thing about life?
Well, I've not faced a lot of death in my life, so I don't have a lot of experience, a lot of death that was very personal to me. But I think one way that you come to grips with just the whole question that people you love leave by death, and that there's such an impermanence. I was just thinking that the other day. I think a person would think this a lot without having to think. It would pass your mind a lot how life sucks, because you can, you're born and you get to love and be so attached to people, and then it just all rots. I mean, just deteriorates. It's very hard to grasp, and it's kind of creepy, and it's kind of depressing. But then there's another plane. It's not necessarily a positive one, but that just kind of comes to grips with the fact that life is an impermanent thing, and that this is the way it is, and that you're going to come in, and the saying is, it's better to live and have lost than to never have loved at all. So that you come in, you open yourself up, you love, you get attached, and yet knowing and understanding and coming to grips with nothing is permanent, that all things fade. So it's just with a lot of hard knocks, and yet, something could happen to me in my life and I could be thrown to desperation, so I don't by no means have this under control, so to speak. And it's not a matter of control. I don't think you can control it, but you've got to kind of go with the flow of life and have the courage to face another day, which in order to do, you would hopefully have some meaning. You've got to have some meaning in life to carry on.
And that's kind of how I want to wrap up with you, looking at meaning of life and getting up and carrying on every day. In your life, you've studied philosophy, you've pursued modeling in Paris, you've been in the entertainment industry to a degree. Now you're a psychologist, you have a rock band. Why did you pursue these things, and what keeps you going, what keeps you motivated? Or would you call it even a motivation?
There have been times in my life where I've not wanted to keep going. That's for sure. So when somebody goes to the pits and doesn't want to walk another quarter of an inch, I can understand that. Not because of extenuating circumstances, but when nothing is reinforcing enough to make you move, you're totally at a standstill and you don't want to carry on. So I've been there, and it can happen to anyone at any time. It can happen to someone again. Life can go in cycles. But I guess things were just interesting. Unfortunately, we are coming out of time here for me to get a full explanation of this. But I guess things are just were just intrinsically interesting to me along the way. Mm-hmm. Again, this foggy navigation. I kind of, went from one thing to another as I was inclined by what seemed to be of interest to me. And at the moment, and a lot of it is conditioning and what you adapt to and what you get used to. At the moment, I'm getting very much liking being in a space where I can devote intense focus mentally. It usually involves reading, relating with some kind of printed material and other kinds of logic and technique that I have to have. I'm being told to stop here. This is difficult. And, maybe our clock is wrong in here.
Would you say there was instinct, though, that drove you?
No. I wouldn't call it instinct. Mm-hmm. I would just...
We're okay.
We have 9 minutes according to 8 minutes. Is that right? 8 minutes. Well, too bad. So I enjoy the challenge of things that require me to use my thinking, but in a focused way where I'm not running. I don't want to run around. I don't want to waste time on the highway. I don't want to be going from one office to another. I don't want to. I want to be, get up and be in a more relaxed mode of how I'm going to, even though my day will be full and have things that are mentally challenging in my way of conditioning to do, and have as little of a lot of this schedule and running from one thing to a next and being here and there, more space, even though that space will certainly hardly be empty. Mm-hmm. That's where I find myself now at the present time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So, how about you? Where do you find yourself?
At the present time, I find myself pretty much in college. There's a lot of pressure to, as I told you earlier before the show, to kind of do this and do that and make sure you have this on your resume and that on your resume. So it's difficult because I feel that pressure, and at the same time, I still really kind of don't know what I want to put on my resume because I don't exactly know what I want to do in my life yet. So it's really hard because there's a lot of pressure to be successful. I feel such a pressure for success in my life that I feel like if I don't figure out what I'm going to do tomorrow, and if I don't hurry and get everything done on time, then it just won't all work out. So unfortunately, that's kind of, I feel like, the way that a lot of people feel in college right now. It's such an urgency to figure out what they want to do and get there and make the money and have the dream.
Well, I'll say one final thing on that, and we'll stop. Learning how to hurry and yet stand still and take your time is a real trick, and yet it's crucial. Mm-hmm. Because you'll always be hurrying if you stay in the hurrying mode. But how you can, when there is that pressure, and it should be by now, and why isn't it yesterday, and look at what this one's got already, and that's always nagging you, and yet how can you learn that patience to tolerate in your own good time everything coming to fruition? It's a paradox, and it can be done, and we have no more time. But that's something I consciously wrestled with for a period. Okay, so merci beaucoup.
I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you for having me back.
Thank you. Good evening to you. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope to see you again. Adios.
Goodbye.